Bert. This game is so mind-boggling, it will knock you out. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
And I'm Sean.
And that's it. It's another one of the fireside chats, mostly always about arcade games. I don't know what that is, Sean, but sometimes the other guys just don't want to join us.
I'm sure it's totally a coincidence that it's about the games that they've all played a million times before. It's fine.
And Bert could be one of those games that some people have played a million times before. Remind me, what's your level of familiarity with our little orange friend?
Going to those bar arcade combination places, I played them there, and at an arcade called Kahunaville in a mall. That's where I played Bert.
I first played Bert online, actually, back in like 2001 or 2002. I guess somebody found a way to emulate those games online, just with Java or something like that. So I'm not certain if it was even the real arcade version or what have you. But I don't know. It was fun. It was just simple enough that you wanted to keep playing. Not as complicated as some of the other arcade games that were hosted on that website. So it was one that I frequently went back to. But it's also not something that we hear much about today. I don't think anyone's screaming for Bert's revival.
Yeah, I think for me, it was always it had a unique enough look because of the unique angle that it presents it at. And again, like you said, it was simple enough that I was easily drawn to it. And then when I would eventually just fail, I was just okay, I'm just not good at that. And then I'd walk away and play something else.
You know, people in 1983, though, when this game came out, they were what I would say Bert crazy for Bert. You know, they were crazy for Bert.
God, stop it.
And I say that not even just because the arcade game was a hit, but because we're talking about over 125 licensed merchandise based on Bert's likeliness. Everything from Frisbees to sleeping bags to bed sheets. I mean, you name it, they made it for Bert. For Bert. Wow,
that's some really uncontrolled consumerism.
I like where you're going with this. Thank you for following along. Bert also even got an animated cartoon as part of Saturday Supercade on CBS. So I don't know if you managed to stumble on this on YouTube or something, but the episodes are up there, and I just think it's hysterical. That you could flesh out something like Bert, who kind of lives in a void in space. Just on a floating
M
pyramid.
Space, yeah. So I guess then you'd be qualified, because I imagine you watched the entire show. So maybe you're qualified to answer this question, because I know that you're really into baseball. But my question is Bert just the Philly fanatic?
Best I can tell, Bert, the Bert that we know in the video games is not the same Bert that they put into this television show. Oh. So in the television show, right? Because in the television show, he's it's almost like it's 1950 or something. There's something off about Bert's world, and he's got a girlfriend, by the way, named QT.
Oh, wow.
So he also has a brother, Bit. I could just, everybody is Q something. And they basically deal with, the same people that you deal with in the game, like Coily and Ugg and Wrong Way, which is funny to think that, that's the name of the enemies. But, they're basically just dealing with them, but in more, social settings. Those guys are bullies to the townspeople. And Bert's kind of that's not cool.
Yeah. You kind of ignored my question, though.
So about the Philly fanatic thing. No, I guess, what I'm saying is I would imagine he is, if you go off of the arcade game, but I just don't buy that the same Bert that's on this TV show, who talks, first off, that's, the weirdest thing, right?
Yeah.
They should have not have said a word, but No, he seems to be pretty level-headed and, supposed to be our hero.
I'd say that, like anything like that, this Q*bert show is more just Q*bert Gaiden than anything. I don't think this is true deep lore in the TV
right.
show.
Whereas, like, the Philly Fanatic, he's like a foil. He's a court jester, if you will.
More like a Q*bert video game.
Yes,
version.
exactly. If I had it my way, and I think both Wreck-It Ralph and that other movie, Pixels, with Adam Sandler, both of them have Q*bert, and he doesn't say a damn word in either one, and that's how I would choose to portray Q*bert as well, as just kind of like this goofy, otherworldly thing that, like, you recognize, but you're like, oh, that's pretty strange that, he's forced to be alive.
Against his will.
Right. I brought all this up in the front, though, just to say that, like, Q*bert was a big deal, and then, like, the video game crash happened, like, the same exact year. So the popularity of the character pretty much declined in 1984. But, that doesn't necessarily explain a lot of things, because, like, Pac-Man and Donkey Kong's still popular because he got, like, attached to the Mario series, but, like, Pac-Man, still very popular. Why isn't Q*bert, like, something that, like, we're not looking for more of that?
I guess we're going to have to start some petitions.
Well, I'll start with, just some observations of my own. I'm nitpicky about this stuff. The title, Q*bert, I don't know, it bothers me because we haven't been saying it properly. It's like, it's Q asterisk Bert.
Yeah, I mean, would you, like, if it was hyphenated, would you think that you have to say it any differently?
No, but I think that's, like, the point of the hyphen, right, is to let me know that it's, like, it's Q*bert is, like, one word, whereas, like, the asterisk doesn't tell me much about anything. Is the Q silent by the asterisk? Like, is that, like, a footnote that you have to read further down?
Oh, God. Yeah, you're right. I think it's supposed to be Q to the power of Bert.
That would work for me a little bit better, like, that would be fun to say every time. Q to the power. Also, just general musings here. Because Q*bert, when he, like, when he gets hit by something, he kind of, like, curses in random symbols, right? He has, like, the @ sign and the exclamation mark and maybe a few other, maybe the ampersand shows up. He has, like, these curses that he does. So that made me think of, like, why isn't it Q*wert? Like, the first, 4 letters on an actual keyboard, like a QWERTY keyboard, like Q*wert. And it's like when he dies, he's just, like, rage quitting and spamming a bunch of symbols on the keyboard. That, like, Q*wert makes sense to me. Q*bert, I'm like, I don't really know this guy.
Well, maybe the idea was that it would be, like, again, we're going into territory where nobody's an expert on anything. But I would say that maybe that was the original idea, but to make it sound more namey, they made it Q*bert, and that you're supposed to just understand that it's based on the keyboard, Or it could be nothing, and we're just we're reading into things that you don't need to.
Warren Davis, who is the creator of Q*bert, did express regret for using the asterisk because it prevented the name from being a common crossword term.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's the sort of things he's thinking about.
It could have lived on for 100 years had he just removed the asterisk. He's actually responsible. The whole thing that we were asking earlier about why did Q*bert die, why is no one asking for Q*bert, it's because there's this uncertainty around the asterisk that, like, no lawyer in America could answer, so they won't dare license the property.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking, I'd never noticed it before, but, like, just in, like, YouTube videos and just general Google results, nothing is, like, everything has the asterisk. I thought it was just, like, one of those stylizations that aren't always respected, but here we are.
Yeah, and I think, like, there's Q*bert and then there's Q*bert. So that's why the asterisk has to be there. That's the emphasis on the Q, if you will. So, Sean, what are we playing here? What is a Q*bert?
A Q*bert. I'm confident that a Q*bert is a game that we're about to talk about, the game itself and not the weird alien creature. It's sort of like, I forgot what game we were talking about. Oh no, we were talking about Pac-Man. Just a few episodes ago, we were discussing the feeling of playing Pac-Man, and one of you said that it was like mowing the grass, and this is sort of just mowing the grass on a very cubey hill, if that's a good enough way to describe it.
Yeah, it's like a bunch of actual cubes stacked on top of each other in the shape of a pyramid, I guess is like the best way to describe that thing. And you have to touch the top layer of each cube to change its color. And this is all done in an isometric viewpoint. So, the cubes do look 3D, and Qbert even has a little bit of like 3D sense to him, right? In the way that a 2D video game could.
Yeah, he's got some shading.
Yeah. So, there's supposed to be this added challenge of it's not just like hopscotch, it's like you actually have to, your inputs kind of are the important thing because you have to know where you are in space, like at any given time, because if you hit to go right, well, what does right mean contextually when you're at the edge of the pyramid, whereas if you're in the middle of the pyramid, so those things kind of change, and that's really like, that's the challenge, right? The isometric nature of the game is the challenging part of the game.
It was so challenging, in fact, that the two things happen here. The manual suggests that to make the game easier, you should play with the controller at a 45-degree angle. And when I read that, I had no idea what they meant. I mean, I knew that the directions were not going to be just up, down, left, right because of this like faux 3D effect. But I didn't think they'd go so far as to like just pretend that your controller is these inputs instead. And then when you actually get into the game, it doesn't start off with the game itself, but you actually like customize your controls with a little helper dude. So I found those very interesting. That both of those things going on here.
The helper dude especially, though, I know that's not like it's a menu screen, but like there is supposed to, they show you a controller, they have a guy there, like there's something,
yes?
there's something great about that though. Like this could have just been put in an options menu, and just like asked you which way, like it would just say up, and then it would say, up on the D-pad as well. Like it would be weird if there wasn't all of this extra visual aid to show you exactly what they were talking about. They actually have it broken down for you so that you can see like Qbert is on this square and he's going to jump to this square. What D-pad button do you think he should press? And, you kind of have to cycle through them and do some work. But I think it's funny that the game lets you customize as far as, like, just even making it opposite. Like, you could say, like, oh, Qbert's jumping up right. Well, I'm going to hit the left button on the D-pad for that. Like, you could totally screw with yourself, too. But I like that it allows full customization of how you control Qbert.
And not just, like, a, mode B of how they might think people would use it. I appreciate that too.
Yeah, and this is made by Ultra Games as well, who were the same people that brought us Gyrus last episode. So that's interesting to think that, like, first they had the Control A, Control B option, and then in this one they're like, give them full customization. And full customization is important because it's not just choose your direction on the D-pad. They did the thing I was kind of hoping they would do. And my preferred method of playing this game on a D-pad controller instead of a joystick is they let you say up and to the right, like to have to press down both buttons.
Oh, you can do that?
Yeah. So you
man.
can actually say like, yeah, for each corner, I actually want to press up and to the right, or right and down, or right down and left. You can actually put that in there. So this way you have to confirm both buttons, but it actually makes it make a little more sense because you can
it's
picture
more one-to-one instead of pretending that you're playing at an angle. So
Right. You can picture which cube you're going to jump on by that little like square hole that's left on the D-pad.
Yeah. Huh. That's really that's like the first accessibility consideration I think we've seen. Even though it's not like it's not in the same sense as how you might think, but I appreciated it.
And even The 45-degree angle thing, though, like, I'm holding my NES controller right now, and I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, okay, maybe? Like, I'd have to actually play the game, but that seems a little more confusing.
It didn't
than just
work.
choosing whatever feels comfortable.
Because I did, playing the game, I did have perspective issues that I'll go into further when we get into it, but I did try to play it at that 45-degree angle that they were talking about, and I guess my brain just doesn't work that way. I just felt like I was holding the controller weird. So, yeah, that was a weird suggestion for them.
Now, Sean, you mentioned about the mowing the lawn thing and Pac-Man. That all happened because we started talking about the term, like, is it satisfying?
Yes.
Arcade games are satisfying, right? That's what makes those short loops worth it and why you keep putting quarters in. There's no grand prize at the end. It's all about just the reward of playing the game itself. And so I have to ask you here, since Q*bert is kind of like a version of the floor is lava, is that satisfying to you? Of like, touch the tiles and watch the colors change, and you have to avoid some enemies, but for the most part, you're just trying to change all of the colors of the tiles from like blue to yellow, yellow to green, green to red. Like, what'd you think?
I'd say that at the most basic, so level 1, round 1, I found it satisfying in that very basic way of like, I'm just gonna turn all these blue, and that did feel good. But the enemies in this game end up turning it, for me, mostly into like an exercise in frustration and kind of futility. Especially I forgot their names, but the ones that will just come and undo your progress. That was just that was like a bridge too far for me. If they just didn't have the enemies that undid your progress, I could enjoy this a bit more. But unlike Pac-Man, where there's none of the ghosts are going to add more stuff for you to have to get rid of or like lay traps for you, aside from them just existing. I'd say that this wasn't as enjoyable.
First, I just want to comment that I hope that the developers of Pac-Man are listening to this episode, because that is absolutely something that needs to be added into the next iteration of Pac-Man. Ghosts should be able to add traps and other crazy things. Like, they should have their own power-ups too. I hope that exists on some kind of level, because that's a great idea. You're right, though. It's a bit much here in Q*bert at the very start. I don't know about you. Level 1 was harder than level 2, and that shouldn't necessarily be how any game is run. Like, I can't think of another example. Usually, level 1, you're like all powered out, or you're supposed to just like learn the ropes. And this is just my own experience, but I found that stage 1 took me so many tries to actually like not die on. And lives are a precious thing.
Yeah.
So you can't really accept too many deaths on stage 1 and think you're going to get very far. So I would just reset a lot.
Uh-huh.
But when I finally got to stage 2, maybe I just got better at the game as a consequence of stage 1 being so hard. But I found stage 2 to be a little more manageable. I don't think it was the right call to say, here's most of the game right off the bat in stage 1, and we're going to litter the screen with these guys too. Like, Snake Boy is coming directly for you, and the bouncing balls is like somebody was juggling and dropped all of them at once.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, the bouncing balls, like, I don't consider them an enemy, I consider them an obstacle. And when it comes to obstacles, I feel like there's an unspoken rule that they should be predictable. Like, you can kind of, a lot of great games break the rule. Like in Donkey Kong, it's kind of random where the barrels will fall, but you can still kind of tell what they're gonna do. You can guess more times than not. With the bouncing balls, I had no idea if they're going to fall down to the left, down to the right, and I feel like I think they might be following you, and they might just be actually just an enemy. So that kind of pissed me off. The fact that an obstacle was behaving like an enemy, and there's just so much going on, especially with with the snakes, and now I'm just ranting. So please stop me.
Well, you're having a post-war flashback. Is what you're having, because I think you can watch somebody play this game and say to yourself like, oh, seems pretty straightforward, and it is. Seems pretty simple. It kind of is, and it seems fun, which it is. But then you play it yourself, and it feels like everyone is out to get you in this game.
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about the balls being random, but I kind of feel like there are certain opportunities on this map where your only choice is just to kind of like tempt fate and say, all right, well, I'm not going to move. And if the ball comes at me, that's just bad luck. Like I don't have many other choices, because sometimes, where you are on the pyramid, especially when you're higher up, it's hard to like quickly get around these things because there's more than 3 on the screen. You're running out of available squares to you, and a lot of times you just get cut off. And I feel like that was just a lack of enemy programming, where I'm not saying that the game needed to be planned of where balls dropped and where the snakes appear, but there should have been some more rules about how enemies navigate the stage in a way that you're not necessarily cut off all the time. Like a lot of times you're just stuck to a zone, and you're repeatedly touching the squares that you've already turned. You're just touching them again and again to avoid obstacles, and that's where things get unsatisfying, because the fun part of this game is watching the colors change from yellow to green. As crazy as that sounds, that is the fun part of this game.
Yeah.
And if I am not doing that, if I am only changing my direction and hoping that I don't forget, how I control my D-pad, that's not a very fun game. That's just me playing like 3D Frogger with Bert.
Yeah. One other thing that I'll say about this, just to compare it to Pac-Man again, is so Pac-Man, there's 4 ghosts. I don't know if there's ever more than 4 enemies on a screen of Bert, but it always feels like there's more. And I think it's because in Pac-Man, it's a very minimal, like, just even in like color space, it's a very minimal look. It's always a black background, and all of the enemies are bright. Whereas in Bert, everything is different colors. Like every level has some new bright color, and your enemies just sort of blend in. So like, whereas with when you're playing Pac-Man, you can just use your peripheral vision to sort of do your own bit of like crowd control and just to get an idea of everything. Whereas I just lose the enemies in the noise of the screen in this game, coupled with other things that, again, I'll get into visually. But it's very hard to make heads or tails of what's happening, I think, for me. Because
you also need to, we can get into the visual thing, I feel like, because that's going to open up a lot of conversation. But you need to always keep a track of just like what you're doing. Like this isn't as simple as a shmup where it's like, kind of how you're controlling your spaceship, and you're focusing more on all of the other enemies and working on dodging them, because you're all on the same space. Like it's just if you imagine graph paper, like you could lay that over and see that all. Bert changes this like established way of looking at video games, and instead you're focused more on like, am I about to jump on the right space? Am I about to do the right thing? I don't care where the enemies are. And then it's like, all right, cool, you did that thing, but now, surprise, like you bumped into an enemy and you're dead.
Yeah, and I mean, I do like the idea of like having to think through your actions, but I think everything else sort of that's acting against that experience. I do like the idea in theory. It just doesn't seem to gel. And I think the number one thing, at least for me, that isn't exactly like the programming or just the game design itself is, and let me know if you felt this too. I was getting some weird optical illusions where, because if you look at any board of Bert, it's really just your brain telling you like, yes, this is a corner of a pyramid or something, and that's just like the orientation that you see. But I would keep getting like this effect where the whole thing would just sort of invert, and now I'm looking up at a quarter of a pyramid, and Qbert looks really weird. And do you know what I'm talking about, or am I just sort of saying words right now?
I could totally understand. Like, you did paint a good picture there, that like the perspective changed. It did not for me.
It didn't. Okay.
It didn't. But I know exactly how Qbert looks, and I think, if you suffer from something like that, right? Or even just suffering from like losing the plane that you're on, right? Like, there's that one enemy that comes from the sides.
Yeah, that also throws you off. Yeah, that's
right.
Part of it.
It throws you off because now you're like, okay, wait a minute. Like, which tile am I on? And I think that's probably not to the fault of the game, right? Like, I think that's like player dependent, similar to how like, no, just similar to like how some people can't play, games with flashing images because they'll have a seizure, right?
Yeah,
like, some people just can't handle the perspective shift. I get very dizzy playing VR games where I have to walk, like I actually feel like I'm going to throw up if I have to actually walk. So I like games that warp you from place to place. This is definitely a thing that happens. I don't know how you solve it, but I could see that would make the game so much more difficult if you constantly lose your place value.
Yeah, if it just had any amount of parallax, I think it would be fine. But because it's at this nominally isometric angle where like the only clues of what your perspective is just like what you just sort of trained to think of it that way. It can make, I don't know, I didn't feel sick, but I did get very disoriented.
I imagine a level of Qbert where the cubes actually like shift up and down. So like in the middle of your playing, you have to be cautious of the moving cubes as they go from like a top-heavy pyramid to like a V shape, Now, that would be something that would definitely trip up me,
yeah.
But would also be worth checking out as an idea as well, like kind of a, a Tetris effect version of Qbert.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
So, did you use those rainbow disked elevators at the sides of the levels, or did those just taunt you as like you totally can use us, but you won't?
I know. I feel like you're playing on hard mode if you don't. But I did get tricked a lot, again, via perspective and I know the rules of the game. This is all my fault. But I would jump in the wrong direction and just jump off the screen when I tried to get to it. Like, I'd say like once every 6 times I tried to use it, I would just kill myself. So they were always like just the siren singing you to the rocks. But I did my best.
I like that they're there, don't get me wrong. I just think it's funny how it's something that to me is like an obvious, like, yes, like get out of jail free card, right? Like I just need to get on the elevator and then I'll be back up at the top and I'll be away from all these enemies. But it felt like whenever I was heading towards them, I was going to be bumped into some enemies or to some kind of trap. I did ride the elevator successfully a few times, so it felt nice. And it's definitely nice that they have them. I think the one-time use thing is an interesting decision. Pac-Man didn't like close the gates if you go from the left side to the right side, if you like warp around, right? Yeah. Like it probably didn't need to be a one-time use thing, but they did choose that. And I don't know what the correct answer is there. Obviously, I'm not great at this game. I played it a bunch though because I really do enjoy the concept.
Yeah,
I think something about the NES mode. I don't know if it's just harder or something like that, but it was hard. Yeah,
I don't know because I can't fully remember my experience playing on a machine. It cannot be that different. I know one thing that gets people tripped up in this game, and you kind of get used to it, is just that input delay because you do have to watch the hop, which is always like it always takes the same amount of time. But I think to some people it could feel sticky. Maybe the game feel on the game feel on the arcade version feels a little different than on the NES. But But no, I also found this game very hard to control, but between the perspective and the density of enemies and everything that we've mentioned so far.
To get back to the delay, though, that is an interesting observation and was something that I liked about the game, that not all the enemies and you moved on like a synchronized clock from space to space. It wasn't like a board game in that respect where everybody moves at the same times. And, obviously that's true. Like, you could just stand on a particular space and everybody else still moves along. But there were weird moments where, like, you could just narrowly dodge an enemy that's technically like on the same platform as you, but if you jump off, like a beat early or like leave a beat later, there's leeway there, and that was that afforded me a lot more gameplay time than it cost me, because there's kind of like an advantage to the brain there than to have that leeway where you don't have to be this like frame perfect of like, all right, well, if he's going up, I'm going down. Oh wait, there's this other guy on the left. He's gonna hit me this way. It would be interesting to see another. We're just creating so many Q*bert games tonight. But
are you talking about like a Necrodancer Q*bert right now?
yeah, it would be interesting to see that. Now that I think about it,
yeah.
But like, I'm glad that this game had some looseness to the hitbox so that you could kind of escape some narrow moments.
Yeah, I did appreciate that, and I could tell that it was something that they were thinking about, because I feel like the default would just be like, once that sprite has decided to move, it is like the game now considers it in that box, and you're just automatically dead. But I did appreciate that they would actually give you that leeway. You do move slightly faster. I think like if you're like trying to outrun the snake from getting from the bottom of the screen to the top, you could easily beat him there, and maybe give yourself some room to maneuver. But I think that there were enough instances where you were just painted into a corner that it didn't always help that much.
And I talked about Q*bert cursing at the start of this episode, but that's a funny thing, right? Like, there's something interesting and unique about that caught my attention even like back in 2002 when I was playing this game as a kid. I think, it's not edgy or anything like that, but it's just a playful thing to have like he could not be cursing for all we know. That could be the Q*bertian language.
I'm sure that's what the designers would say, but I think he's actually saying like every 4-letter word we can think of. I like to think of him that way.
Sure, but like, I don't know, did you feel like, for me, that was like a significant addition to the character, like actually like a small little thing that went like a long way.
Yeah, he's actually a flawed being of some sort that gets frustrated with himself, and I guess is just more somewhat annoyed with his enemies than actually thinking them as enemies. I think you could read into it, and maybe everyone will have a different interpretation of Q*bert's psyche.
Yeah, it's just every time he dies, he's having a gamer moment.
An epic gamer moment.
Exactly. Sean, would you be shocked if I told you that the original title for this game was !! !! !! #, !! ! ! ! ! ! ! ! !
I would say that that's a really weird thing to make up, so I would be inclined to believe you.
And I am telling the truth, but I just think, the most interesting thing is like this was like an actual title. Like, it never shipped, I think. I don't think it ever shipped with that title, but they built it into the arcade cabinets first. And it got like all the way to like the president of the company, which, this is Godaleb. So they were like, I don't know if I'm saying that right, by the way, but they're a pinball company, not a video game developer. But like, it got all the way up to the president, and he was like, I kind of like it.
Oh, that's so weird. What would you even refer to it as? Like,
right,
static noise?
Yeah, you would say that game with the symbols, like, I think
also, I think
that's
it's
ultimately
Gottlieb. But yeah.
Oh, okay. That's why they changed it, though, right? Like, there was just no marketable, there's not marketable to call it that. But I think it is really funny to think that, like, even back then, people were kind of testing the limits of what people would put up with, like the original title being just a string of symbols, feels like something that we would now see on Adult Swim.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say so.
And Q*bert was supposed to shoot, I guess, like a black ball out of his, if you notice, his orange round body has another, like, a part of it
An
that
orifice?
juts out. Like,
yeah.
It's I guess a mouth, right? Let's call it a mouth, but it is really more like it's a freaking cannon, if you ask me. So I think he was going to shoot cannonballs out of these things as another way to take out the enemies. But Warren Davis, who was the creator of the game, he wanted to, remove as many complexities as possible and make it so that you could play the game with just one hand. So remove the ability to shoot, just made the game about stepping on the spaces, nothing more. Do you think you went in the right direction? Do you think shooting might have been another way to make this game a little more fun?
No, I think the charm of it is, again, the simplicity that we're talking about. I mean, it does turn into a very anxious simplicity, but in terms of that decision, I agree that was the way to go. I don't think it would add anything if I was, because, like, even how would that work? Like, you're gonna just throw them, like, it would be another obstacle, but it might hit the other dudes. I guess. I like it the way it is in comparison to that.
I also like Q*bert being a harmless guy in the wrong space. Like, he's innocent and you care for him and you don't want him to get hurt. And then when he does get hurt, he curses and it's cute, If he's shooting a gun and killing snakes, then when he curses, now he's like a badass. It's like, oh, this guy's like Bart Simpson.
Is Bart Simpson a badass?
Well, no, I guess, like, I was trying to think of, like, what would be the Q*bertian version of forget it. It's not important. Also, Q*bert predates Bart Simpson by 6 years.
True.
So I just think, not the badass part, but maybe just like the, kid with attitude.
Yeah, he's got he's got Q*bertitude.
Yeah, he's actually Q*bart.
Whoa.
I said it. Anything else you want to talk about?
I really don't know. I feel like you have some other stuff.
I do. I have some sequels and spin-off stuff because Q*bert, the Q*bert craze was real. And they did release a sequel game in the arcade called Q*bert's Cubes. Now, I don't know if that was the right title for a sequel. I don't think Q*bert 2 would have been any better, but it wouldn't have been any worse. Q*bert's Cubes. What do you think? Is that a good title?
I think that it's just like, because Q*bert, like the Q part of Q*bert is trying to make reference to cubes because you're hopping on cubes, and I think just to add cubes again to the end is just adding redundancies. But if you want to be as flexible with the pronunciation of the Q as we have been, then maybe Q*bert's Quoobs would have been better.
Maybe that's actually how they intended people to. And you think about it, right? If it was a bunch of symbols, would the second game have just been more symbols? Would it have been like @ exclamation mark, hashtag, question mark, @ exclamation mark, parentheses?
I think it would be in parentheses, but yeah, we're on the same page.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's actually good. I like that. So anyway, it's similar gameplay, Q*bert's Cubes to Q*bert, but now it's in 3 dimensions. Now, they describe it that way. I thought the first game was in 3 dimensions. I don't see how this is really any different. In fact, I would argue this one is less in 3 dimensions because the cubes are just kind of more spaced out now. Like, you can tell that they're all boxes and everything, but they're not actually, like, touching each other. It seems very strange. I don't think, maybe I'm not looking at this the right way, and maybe there was supposed to be played with some 3D glasses or something that made it that kind of 3D, but something about this it just seems wrong to me, and I can understand why I've never heard about this game before today.
Yeah, I'm watching I'm watching it right now, and yeah, they've just separated the surfaces, and I guess changed the way. Oh, I see how it is. So I get it. So basically, it's as if you jumping on to the surfaces didn't just change the face color, but you actually had to rotate the entire cube so that the correct face was on top. So
it's a Rubik's Cube now.
If every Rubik's Cube had like just one color on each side and you couldn't change all of the little... Basically, yeah.
Okay, but also a Rubik's Cube with only one color, that's my kind of Rubik's Cube.
All
right.
Yeah.
Now, the next game that I'm going to talk about, I'm sure there are other ports of Q*bert, and it got on every Atari console, 2600, 5200, 7600. They're all on there, so I'm not going to talk about ports. But I have Q*bert 3, which this game better be actually called Q*bert Cubed. Okay, because, that is a mistake. If the 3 isn't supposed to be... for cubed.
Nope.
I think that they really botched this.
It is not in the correct place. It's just Q*bert 3.
I can't believe that they would opt for Q*bert 3 when Q*bert Cubed is in front of them. It's literally staring at them. They just had to move the 3 up a little bit more. Instead, we get Q*bert 3. Where was Q*bert 2? I know it was Q*bert Cubes, but, I can't think of a series that goes the game with a subtitle, and then the game 3. I just can't think of that.
Man, I'm sure there's something I could think of, because I know that still happens, but I'm looking at footage now of Q*bert 3, and it's even more just busy. I don't know how anyone can focus playing this game.
Well, this is Q*bert with new layouts and new patterns. So, for instance, you can do, the boxes are now American flags.
Yeah, no, I see that. But, you've got this psychedelic background that keeps changing, and I think this is the game that's going to give, forget about modern video games. This game with the flashing psychedelic imagery in the background, that's what's going to give you a seizure.
Yeah, and, it's really interesting because I did play what I'm going to officially call Q*bert Cubed and own the rights to. When I played this game, before you die, but as you're about to die, let's say you're jumping off and they know that you're not going to land on another platform, you're jumping off into space, right?
Yeah.
But before you even get close to dying, just by the fact that you press the input, everything else on the screen stops. And that just feels weird to me, that there's something both glitchy and uncomfortable about every enemy just halting in space, everything just freezing up because you've pressed a button that is eventually going to kill you, but the second you press it, everything is off limits. It's you cannot undo this decision. Now you need to watch what you've done.
I think it's more a comment on the fact that in this universe, this entire universe is just a projection of Q*bert's body. It's a solipsistic game where the only real thing is Q*bert, and now that Q*bert is dead, everything else ceases to be.
I see. I thought of it more like a stage play, everyone's just acting, and then when Q*bert jumps off stage and kills himself, all the other actors are oh shit, is that supposed to happen? Wasn't in the script?
Okay, that's not like a stage play then. That's more like a stage play gone wrong. But
Right. Sorry, I didn't know I needed the extra subtitle. I'll be sure to make that the second game will be called that, and then the third game will just be called Stage Play 3. Anyway, Q*bert for Sega Dreamcast is up next.
Okay.
It's also came to PlayStation 1 and stuff, so I don't know why I singled that out. I just think it's funny when consoles that people don't I don't know. I never thought there was a Q*bert game on Sega Dreamcast, but I'm sure people who collect Sega Dreamcast own this copy of Q*bert. They don't give it a subtitle or anything. It's just Q*bert all over again, and cute. It's actually it's like Donkey Kong 94 in the sense that you start off playing the normal Q*bert arcade game, like with the old graphics and everything, and then you move into the 3D puzzle adventure game that Q*bert on Sega Dreamcast is.
Whoa. Okay. That I like that. I'm not seeing it right now. Because I'm watching it, and it's just like, it looks like an N64 game. I don't.
Oh yeah. Make no mistake about it. It ain't pretty. But I think that this game was always going to come too late. Like, even on N64, it was going to be weird that it was there.
Yeah, just
Q*bert didn't need. Q*bert was.
Yeah.
He was already 3D. It was already a 3D arcade game in 1983. Now, when you embrace the actual bad graphics of like an N64, like that's not progress. That's actually a step backwards. I think about this with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The arcade games look awesome for their sprite work and everything, and then they like remastered some of those games, like they did Turtles in Time HD on Xbox 360, and it was just like crappy 3D models, but the same exact game recreated. And it's like, who were the fans of the beautiful sprite work arcade game that said, just give me the exact same thing again, but with Xbox 360 graphics? Like, I don't think any of them said that.
It's like the Final Fantasy 6 or 3, whatever you want to say, for the phones, and how they just have like chibi 3D stuff now. And I didn't want that.
Nobody wants that, so I hear you. And they did that for every Final Fantasy game that was part of the older lines, right? Like, I think even you could play Final Fantasy 2 and 3, which were Japan exclusives. You can play them on mobile, but you have to play them with the chibi version. Like, you can't just say, give me the NES art.
I demand satisfaction.
Yep. Last on my list is Q*bert Rebooted. I don't know. Felt like there could have been another cube thing there, like Q*bert Recubed or Q*bert Recubed. Yeah, I like it. Recubed.
Well, it looks like here he's actually not jumping on cubes all the time anymore. Like, they can be like hexagonal.
Yeah, they're hexagons this time. So now you have 6 points of direction, and this is a mobile game, so I imagine it's like swiping on your phone.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
In those directions or something. I couldn't play this one because I mean, maybe we have the technology, but I don't know how to emulate mobile games.
Well, it says it's on PS4.
PS4?
Yeah.
Q*bert Rebooted.
PS4.
A game that looks like that went to the PS4.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. I mean, why not? But so then it had to have also just been like, using, an
analog stick
at that point. Right. Yeah. But the 6 points of direction instead of the classic 4, I'm for that. I think that out of all the pitches tonight, is the one that makes sense that it was greenlit. We pitched a lot of different Q*bert games, but I think when you say, well, what if we just take the same game,
what
but
if
now you
Polygon,
can jump in 6?
But more.
Right, exactly. I feel like this is the one executives would be like, of course. And so, obviously, it was made back in 2014, though, so for PS4, though. So maybe go spend, I know it's not $60, but I'm going to make the joke. Go spend $60 on Q*bert Rebooted. Yeah. Nintendo would do it. They would charge you $60 for that game.
Oh, they would.
On Switch. But we don't charge anything for the most important part of our show, Sean. We don't like ad support the essential games list, which is the part I'm talking about here.
No, it's the Nabisco essential games list.
Right. This is free to the listeners, power to the players. This is something we do every episode, and somehow we've been talking about Q*bert for a really long time. But we also need to wrap up our time. We need to come to a decision, and we're going to make that decision on the essential games list.
I would say that on the inaugural Nestle essential games list, I would say that Q*bert is not essential just because every other arcade game that nothing's really changed from the arcade. I can't put a game like that on the essential games list, and I can hardly put Q*bert on any surface without dying. So that's me.
I like that. I like that ending. That was very nice. And Shout out to Nabisco. What can I say? I'm all in on it now. I believe in them. That's how sponsorships work. If you just say them enough, they sponsor you. They're like, oh, these guys are talking about us an awful lot. Here's where I fall with Q*bert, because I fall off the stage all the time with Q*bert. There's something about like a game like this being fun for someone like me who's awful at it. Like that takes a lot to make a game that you can still enjoy no matter how bad you are at it, right? How many games do you know like that? So Q*bert does have something going for it, but I really think that's all it has going for it. It's kind of understandable to me why the Q*bert quiz died in 1983 with the video game crash. I came up with a lot of ideas for how to make Q*bert a little better, but even those ideas aren't going to get it very far into like, my like, oh, now I should play that game. Like, I don't even think I think I'd skip them all. So Q*bert is one of those games that you find in a barcade or, on a trip and you're just like, oh, this guy has Q*bert in his deli. Okay, cool. Let's play it. Like, those things will happen to you in life because they sold a lot of Q*bert cabinets.
Yeah.
And that's when you play Q*bert. You don't play Q*bert when you're looking through a list of essential games that were released on the Nintendo Entertainment System. In fact, I'd go as far as to say you don't actively seek out a Q*bert arcade cabinet.
Q*bert will find you.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't like, when you're building a arcade for your downstairs basement, right? Which, like, I'm definitely not, so this is not, nobody's showing off here. I'm saying, if you're one of those people, you're only buying the Q*bert arcade cabinet if you, like, were there in 1983. No one is saying, I need to include Q*bert in my list of arcade cabinets that I want to buy when the prices are, like, $600. Like, no one's doing that. So that's how Q*bert fleshes out here. It's not as tough a decision for me as some of our other classic arcade games because those are just great games that happen to also, be on the NES and probably be slightly inferior. Q*bert doesn't have that problem. Q*bert is just, it's always been an inferior arcade game to the greats.
Oh, man. That was rough.
Yeah, I think you could say that I just spiked Q*bert there. And the reason I use the word spiked is because we will be playing Tecmo Bowl next week.
Hell yeah.
Next week, Tecmo Bowl, everybody must play as the Bills.
I don't know if the Bills are in this one, are they?
I feel like the Tecmo Bowl has the NFL license.
I think they do, but I don't think that they have all the teams.
Oh, got it. Okay, interesting. Well, that stinks. I think the Bills are, I'm pretty confident they're in Tecmo Super Bowl.
They
so
are.
We'll
They're very much in Tecmo Super Bowl, but
yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
Lose 4 times in a row, I suppose.
I swear to God, Mike.
It doesn't matter. We're all fans here of nostalgia and the Bills. The two must always go together.
Exactly.
Tecmo Bowl is a game that a lot of people hold dear to them, though, Sean. So I feel like there's a lot of pressure on us to, to give it its due diligence.
Hey, I'm the one that usually that's all for the sports. So if it bears any essentialness, it's probably going to come from me.
All right. So next week we'll be playing Tecmo Bowl. Next week we'll probably have a bigger cast. And
maybe
next week, yeah, maybe. I said probably. I think probably and maybe are the same kind of words, Sean. Don't correct me like that.
I was just adding also.
Oh, got it. All right, sorry.
So I'm sorry to offend you.
No, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. Just remember, this is a show where we're supposed to be like, just 4 best friends recording a podcast.
I get it. I'm fired.
I don't want to break appearances on the show.
I get it.
Okay. All right. Whatever. Next week we may or may not have Sean, but we will have Tecmo Bowl, and that'll be next Friday. You can find Nostalgia at NostalgiaCast on Twitter. You can find me, Michael Esposito, at Esposito Film on Twitter. And I, Nostalgia, and yes, Sean, will also be talking to you very soon.